Wow, Angelo's making a video? What kind of content will he bring to us? Well, bad English in a terrible audio mainly. But yeah, welcome guys. I wanted to do something different for my recent Q&A I made on my Facebook page and War Thunder live account. So this is the third time I record this, since once I finished the last one, I edited and put it all together, noticing just at that point that the video would have been something like an hour and a half long. So I decided to cut it in two parts. You guys really asked me a ton of stuff. Contain yourself, goddammit. Just kidding. I love you guys. Thanks for all the support you give me about my comics and art. I really appreciate that. As you can see, we are using War Thunder as our background today. This to celebrate my recent partnership with Gaijin that started, it was like 2-3 weeks, a couple of weeks ago. I really want to thank
Much Spirit
about that, since he made an exception in my case. So, with no further ado, let's start with the questions. Since I found a lot of questions about the same argument more than once, I decided to make this first part just speaking about this kind of general questions you've made me. A very frequent kind of question is about how I create my comics and art. Well, I draw the comic on paper using just a pencil, then I scan it and color it digitally. It's simple like that. The program I use to draw and color for the coloring part, let's say, also in some cases about some drawings, it's called Studio Paint, or more completely Clip Studio Paint. It was known as Manga Studio once, or at least I bought it when it was called Manga Studio. That's essentially how I create my strips. The process takes something like 2 days, when in the first one I draw and scan it, and the second one being about the coloring and the lettering of the scenes, let's say. Sometimes it takes even a third day when there's some kind of difficult light situation, complex light situation like night, when there are a lot of explosions, etc. No! Nailed it. Another very frequent question of you guys, it's about what made me start to draw comics like Hatzer and Friends. I started drawing comics about when I was at high school. In such a period, I just wanted to tell a story. I had very few interesting ideas about fantasy stories or even thriller stories, etc. And since I'm not a very good writer, I decided to make a comic out of it. My friends liked the comics, so I continued to draw this kind of comics, let's say more episodes of those stories. And that's how I started making comics, essentially. It was hilarious how bad I was at the times. That was my first attempt to draw humans. Initially I used to draw only animals and vehicles, or even fantasy beings like dragons, chimeras, etc. my god. Damn, that was a big engine roar, Locust. That actually scared me. What's happening here, mate? As I said, that was my first attempt to draw comic. Oh my god! Sorry about that, that was some real-life calling. But yeah, I started drawing comics in general at high school. But if you want to speak about what made me making the RTS Game series, well, there was a lot of factors, let's say. First of all, the first kick, we could say, maybe was due to contest I made some years ago for Wargaming. In such a contest, the participants had to, oh my god. No. What are you? Ah, you Russian strong heavy machine gun. Don't you? Well, maybe I should have bring some HE rounds. Engine? Yeah. Again, who are you? Oh, B1. As I was saying, the contestants had to pick a particular type of vehicles, such as heavy tanks, light tanks, etc., and trying to illustrate how to properly use them. I picked up the tank destroyer, and actually I made sorry about concentration. And actually the comic came out was pretty similar to Hitler and Friends strip. I maybe will put the comic here on video. God, they are loud. And that comic won. So after when I finished my, I put that of course on my portfolio, and when I finished my comic art school here in Milan, I went to a very good comic artist here in Milan, and when he saw my portfolio, he thought that comic with the little cute tanks was actually pretty good, a very professional one, and so I decided to use the tanks as protagonist of a web series. Since I was really looking to make some kind of web series to keep me busy and in training, let's say, after I finished school. Damn it. Oh, I actually got it on fire. Nice. Burn! Yeah. Okay. While for the strip format, let's say, my inspiration was an Italian author called Bombi, who made, I think, my favorite comic series ever, which was called SUBTITLES. And it was actually a series of gags, a series of strips about World War II, featuring some silly German soldiers as protagonists. And that was actually inspired me to make my web series I wanted to do, being a series of gags in not properly strips, but self-concluding pages. So I wanted Hetzer to be the protagonist of my series for three factors. First of all, I wanted something that was known, and not some silly unknown Italian vehicle that maybe would have been much familiar to me, but not so for everyone on the web. Secondly, Hetzer is my favorite German vehicle, and thirdly, it's the same vehicle featured in the comic page that won the contest. So I decided Hetzer to be the protagonist of the series. Oh. I found a lot of comments asking for more warships in my comics, and it's really interesting. I have to figure out a bit of gags with them, just because I have not a very good knowledge about warships. When I swear that I shoot at that engine. Okay. As I was saying, since I have no deep knowledge about warships, I'll try my best. I have to figure out a bit of gas with them, but yeah, I give it a try, for sure. A lot of you asked me what's my favorite and the least favorite type of vehicles, such as fictional tanks. Because, whoa. What should I do? Let's try maybe survive. Okay, the Tsar is dead. What did... Let's see if I can... surprise it. You asked me about my favorite designs, maybe the fictional one, and I have to admit I love a lot of paper tanks ideas, let's say concepts, such as the Italian P43 bis. I think it's my favorite out of all, just because of the look of it. It really reminds me of some kind of MBT, or it looks like a Panther with a better silhouette to me. That's why I love it. And that's, I think, my favorite paper vehicle, while my least, I think, is the Ratte. I don't like super heavies or something like that. I don't like heavy tanks in general, so super heavies and Land Cruiser to me are... I really don't like them. Let's put like this. You ask me what's your favorite Allied and what's your favorite Axis tank, so we are speaking about ground vehicles only. My favorite Allies tank, it's the M8, no, sorry, not this, the M8A1. Just because I found it very cute and very deadly at the same time. I love the design of it. While my favorite Axis vehicle, it's this one. Sorry about that. No. Yeah, this one, the L3. The L3 is my favorite Axis vehicle. Not actually this variant. I love the Don Veloce one. So the one with the flamethrower, but not the trails. There was two variants of the flamethrower. The one with a trail of fuel for the flamethrower, and one which is actually Don Veloce, the Don Veloce version, which had the fuel stored up here in a container over the engine deck. And that's my very favorite X vehicle. It looks pretty silly and cute at the same time. But I actually fall in love with this when I was playing what was the name? Man of War, yeah, Man of War. I'm also really love RTS. Man of War is one of my favorites, and there was a mod which introduced the Italians, and in such a mod you actually could call the L3 with the flamethrower, or the variant. So you could call the MG ones these with the 20mm, and as I said, the flamethrower. It was really an effective unit. I fall in love with it. There was a really difficult question about my favorite World War II vehicle in general. So out of all nation and out of every type of vehicle, we are speaking about tanks, AFVs, planes, ships, everything. I think my favorite vehicle, it was, as I said, it was really difficult to find one. I have a lot of design I love, but my favorite one, I think, is the Reggiane 2001. Because I love everything out of it. I love the designs, I love its look. It's also cute, which is a plus. I love the flying characteristics of this plane. And most of all, I love the fact that it has a lot of variants with bomb loads. It had a lot of variants capable of doing cross-air support, which is my favorite role. There was also a variant with which is my favorite, which had a modified 381mm shell as a bomb. So it was a 640 something kilogram bomb, but it actually was a shell, a very huge shell from the main gun of the Littorio battleships. Also, a lot of you asked me what's my favorite vehicle of all times, and well, here it is, the automatic. You can't hear about the automatic and what he's capable of, and do not worship it. It's truly a god among us, like the Bob sample. We should do something like an Olympus of tanks with the automatic, the Bob sample, and I don't know, maybe the ADATs, maybe. Then you guy asked me what something about more specifically about my favorite vehicles in game, since well, these were of course questions I found on my Watch Under Live account, and one of you asked me what's my favorite vehicle to play, and even here too it's pretty difficult to answer. Let's say I love the L3. The L3 is I think the funniest one. Yeah, the L3 is the funniest one to play. I just love how it performs incredibly trolly and well in high tier battles. It's fun at its own tier, so 1.0. It gives its best at 10.0 at high tier. I had a lot of situations at high tiers where a lot of NPTs were passing right beside me without noticing that I was there. And yeah, if this thing would have spotting mechanic, it would be extremely good at high tiers. Last question I found more times in the Q&A, most of all in the in the War Thunder Live again. It's what made me start playing War Thunder. Well, I started playing at the good old times when the Italians were just a bunch of aircraft in the German tree. And that's essentially what get me into the game. I was looking for a MOBA game about warplanes, since I was already playing World of Tanks those days, and I wanted something similar but with planes. And a friend of mine told me about War Thunder, and most of all the fact that there was a bunch of Italian planes in it. I was really curious about Italian World War II aircraft. I didn't know anything about that at those time. I started my passion with the World War II war machines like planes and vehicles due to a game called Rules. I really loved the game. Again, as I said, I played a lot of RTS games, and that one is it's really my favorite one of all times. That game actually surprised me a lot, and it's still enjoying to play today. I still play it sometimes, and it was essentially the game that made me know about some Italian machines. I didn't even know. I was one of those guys who, when got into rules and started making, multiplayer games. Saw the Italian flag and said, "Whoa! So Italy had some vehicles, some war vehicles, some tanks, etc." And yeah, I was aware the fact that Italy had pretty cool warplanes. I already knew, I had not knew, but have heard about the 202 and the 205, the Veltro. But I didn't knew about everything else, about this stuff, all of this, all of this stuff. And of course, all of the I was sure Italy had only something like the M13 during the war. I didn't even heard about the tank destroyers. I didn't ever heard about the P40 and the armored cars too. So, and in that game, since there are both the AB, well, not this, the AB40 in Roots, there's the AB40, which is the version with the only two machine guns. But there's the AB40, the AB43, the M52. There's also the P40, etc. And some of the tank destroyers. Mostly the 9053 surprised me. This we of course no hate. I was also ignorant about British, Japan vehicles, and also US. I just knew about the Sherman for the USA, the Panther and the Tiger for the Germans, and the T-34 for the USSR. I didn't even know about the French vehicles though. That game introduced me to almost everything, and since also I found a really strong Italian aviation up in that game. I really wanted to dig deeper, let's say, for my own nation war vehicles during the war, and I really found it passionate. I started to playing, as I said, World of Tanks, and after I started playing War Thunder. And Rus is the one who started, let's say, it all. So if I'm playing War Thunder now, if I have the tanks passion, or what, let's say the war vehicle passion, because I love tanks, planes, ships, etc. It's only due to that game. Before of that, As said, I was more into just modern jets and science fiction. I played a lot of science fiction RTS, but when I knew Ruse and actually played it, everything changed. I completely swapped my preferences from science fiction to World War II, and after that to modern vehicles. Then again, after Ruse, I of course played War Game and all the War Game series, and that made me get into also modern stuff like helicopters and MBTs, which now I find even here. War Game was also the game that made me know about our Lord and Savior, the automatic. So this was the last question. I will make, as I said, a second video out of this Q&A. Also, before I forgot, I found a lot of Italian questions, so questions you get me in Italian, and for those I will make a third video, so a whole separate video where well, I will speak Italian to answer them. But for the second one, it will be a bit different. This one was more like a let's talk, so I was actually talking while playing, while showing you some of the vehicles, etc. The second one, I want to make something more like a commentary, so you probably will see some gameplays in background, but I'm not actually playing it. I will talk over it, and I don't want you to get annoyed by me swapping continuously from game, Facebook, game, watch on the live, game, this question, game, the other question on watch on the live, etc, etc, etc. So expect another video. I can't say when, since I think it will be a bit more difficult to put together as a commentary, but I'll try to figure out how. So thank you again, guys, for all the support, and see you in the next video. Bye!